The story begins with the narrative that it was a senseless death. During the time, the light that had been extinguished for 10 years came to light. The girl tried to call her parents, but she was hit by a car and died. It was as if her whole body had gone numb. Slow breathing. There was no choice but to just die. Suddenly, the girl shifted into another body and grabbed her arm with a scream. She didn't realize what was happening. She wasn't in pain or why the girl was sitting in front of her. The girl realized that anyone seeing this picture would think she had hit the girl on the ground. The blonde-haired young man turned to Lady Blair, asking her what was going on. The young man blocked the girl on the ground. The main character remarked that this guy had such beautiful eyes. The guy turned to the girl named Anastasia sitting on the ground and asked if she was okay. The girl replied to the gentleman that she was fine and she was fine. The girl wondered if she was in a dream. She saw the young man's intimidating gaze on her, not understanding why the man was looking at her so strangely. The guy noted that he would not go into details. He asked the girl not to say anything and just go back to her place. The heroine sincerely stated that she didn't even know where she was. She didn't understand who they and that woman were. The heroine wondered why that woman's face was so swollen. It looked like the heroine had hit her. She was shocked. She wondered if she had really hit her. She wanted to excuse herself, but abruptly a gentleman was right in front of her, addressing Lady Blair and wondering if she could hear him. He asked her to please go back to her place. The girl ran away from the place. She began to remember Anastasia, the gentleman, Lady Blair, and it came to her that it was a novel she was reading. Lady Blair suddenly turned back to the gentleman and Anastasia, interjecting the girl's first and last name. The girl looked at the guy and clarified if he was Aidan Verwards. The guy was clearly puzzled, asking how she could. The heroine realized that this was definitely the novel. She became a character in the novel, namely, the villain nicknamed Crazy Lady. She took Anastasia by the hand and spun around with her, unable to believe it. All she has to do now is get along with the protagonist, Lady Blair. That's her name now. She's the heroine of the novel. She still couldn't get over the fact that she was Lady Blair now. The girl hugged Anastasia. They say that luck comes after long and hard work. What she didn't know then, however, was that being possessed by a villain wasn't so pleasant. Renee Blair. The girl wondered what she had done so much that everyone started to think she was crazy. However, she found out the reason the very next day. In the half-sleep, the girl noticed that the blanket was so soft, why it even felt like it was made of cloud pieces. Sitting down on the bed, she remembered this place. She was now the heroine of a novel, after all. She always woke up early in the morning to go to work. But it doesn't matter now. She didn't remember the name of the novel because she had read a great many of them. The only thing she remembered was that the main character's name was Anastasia. But who was the male protagonist? Who is Renee Blair anyway? The best man in the kingdom, master slapper in charge of banquet events, a rare keeper. She's obsessed with this character, but so far it's not all bad. Why? Because Renee Blair is so rich, she makes a king look like a pauper. The only problem is that she was murdered in the banquet hall. The girl really doesn't even remember who was responsible for the death. But from now on, the girl decided that she will no longer be a villain. She also needs to be friends with the main character. Apparently, it's a character who has a connection with her. If she appears to be a good person, she can find happiness. The girl wondered if the main character would like her. Someone knocked. Lady Blair said it was all right to come in. A trembling maid entered, and the girl noted that she was very frightened. Then she immediately realized that it would take a long time to change her personality. Suddenly, a menu appeared in front of the girl, stating that today's mission was to slap this maid, and the options were to accept or decline. The girl genuinely didn't understand what it was. She was dumbfounded. Coughing and drawing the maid's gaze, Lady Blair pointed to the screen that had popped up and asked her what it was. The maid was horrified and fell to her knees and declared that she was not good enough to understand it, and she begged to be forgiven. Lady Blair asked in horror why the maid was apologizing. Let her get up. The maid asked the lady for forgiveness. The maid continued to shake and asked, please forgive her. Lady Blair replied that it was fine and asked her to stand up. The maid declared that she couldn't, but Lady Blair shouted that it was all right. In fact, however, it was not all right at all. The mistress asked the maid why she was crying, if she was afraid of her. The maid replied that she was not. It was just that as soon as the lady woke up, the maid thought she would hit her. but for the first time, she didn't. Lady Blair realized that she had a long and hard road ahead of her. The girl hugged the maid. Everything went smoothly after that. The maid was touched by Lady Blair's actions, and she even helped her get ready for breakfast. She noticed that even so, the pop-up would not go away. She wondered if she could touch it. It felt like glass, so it's real. If this is the reason for Renee Blair's bad deeds, could it be real? So she could have unintentionally acted this way? She wondered what would happen if she turned down the assignment. She noticed the phrase, "today's mission." In particular, the word "today's" was very alarming. After Lady Blair clicked reject, the notification disappeared and the girl calmed down. Just then, she heard the sound of a new notification. The girl starts to ask that she let it be a hallucination, the most common hallucination. Second mission of the day, the girl was sent home and has to tear Lady Blair's papers to shreds in his office. The girl was mortified as to why it had reappeared. The girl wondered if it would keep appearing until the girl accepted one of the assignments. Lady Blair is the main character of the novel. He is also the older brother of Renee Blair, that is, her older brother. Does she really need to tear up his papers now? The girl came to the conclusion that all these assignments were disgusting. She clicked reject once more. She decided to try again. She would decline without looking. The notification said that this was the last assignment, and was she sure she wanted to decline? Lady Blair clicked yes, and the notice disappeared. She was glad that she had finally, but the notification popped up that she had received a penalty for abandoning all of today's tasks. The penalty? Fever. Time: 1 week, 6 days, 23 hours, and 59 minutes. The task is not completed, and she gets a penalty. The girl was shocked at the fine, not realizing what it meant. Refusing a mission threatened a fine time. Yes, that's a whole week. The girl didn't understand why it hurt so much. She's on the bed and she felt better. Meanwhile, in the royal castle, the young gentleman turned to Anastasia, noting that the girl could not concentrate on her work. Perhaps something was bothering her. The girl asked not to worry. She would do all the work. The guy replied that he didn't mean that. He asked the girl if anything was bothering her at the moment. The girl replied that it was about Renee. The guy clarified if the girl was sure that she was thinking about that girl. Anastasia wondered if the girl hadn't seemed different yesterday. She didn't understand what had happened to Lady Blair there, because yesterday she had hugged Anastasia and it was crazy. And the young gentleman she called Aiden Verwords. The guy repeated the name. It was just like old times. The guy wondered what the girl was trying to say. Did she really think that Lady Blair had changed to what she used to be? But he immediately reminded Anastasia that Renee had been doing evil things for 10 years. They had hoped for a long time that she would change, but all in vain. He wondered why the girl was suddenly looking for some kind of hope again. After all, she was not the Renee she used to be. She had even given up her blood relatives. Suddenly, someone asked if the boys were talking about him. It was Mr. Leeden. Aiden asked irritably why he hadn't knocked first. Mr. Leeden replied that he had knocked, but there was no answer, and reminded the boy not to forget his place. Aiden wondered if the Lord had decided to mock him now. Mr. Leeden asked how his assistant had done. He glanced at the mountain of papers and wondered if it was the document they'd picked up today, so much so. Anastasia apologized and said that she would finish up quickly. Mr. Leeden noted that he needed the girl to find some documents instead. Knight Hugo sent a report after defeating the dragon. The girl inquired if he needed those documents. Mr. Leeden thanked the girl. Suddenly, he asked the girl if she was okay. She replied that yes, she was fine. The girl noted that the magic had healed her. Mr. Leeden motioned for the girl to tell her to apologize. Anastasia replied that Renee had nothing to apologize for. Harisha from the Ministry of Magic walks into the office, saying that a letter for Leeden has arrived. She doesn't know why, but it has red wax in it. Ideally, if it's red wax, it means it's something important. Mr. Leeden read the letter carefully and turned abruptly, saying that he had to go back to the mansion. The boys asked him what had happened. Mr. Leeden replied that they said his sister was ill. Anastasia was dumbfounded to hear that Renee was feverish. After all, nothing like this had happened in the last 10 years. The maid shared with Mr. Leeden that she had first been seen by the maid who had served her in the morning. They say the girl was perfectly healthy this morning. Mr. Leeden asked if they were sure. They called a physician to check, and it turned out to be a fever. No treatment is helping her. Mr. Leeden asked if they were sure she was ill. The maid confidently stated that she had been well since morning. The maid noted that there was no doubt. The maid shared that Mrs. Blair had hugged and comforted her this morning, and she also hadn't hit the maid today. Mr. Ladine flew into the room to his sister's bed. After trying to use magic, he summarized that healing magic doesn't help. The maid added that conventional healing or magic didn't work. They didn't understand what they should do now. Ladine replied that there was no need to do anything and said to just forget about it. Someone had called people so horrible and they would be cursed. The girl would live her whole life being unloved. Renee opened her eyes abruptly. The new notice said that she had received a fine for abandoning all of today's missions. The girl wondered if she had gotten a ticket for doing nothing wrong. She realized she didn't want to go through that again. She didn't realize if the real Renee was like this. Now she understood why she had lived such a life. She didn't know what she was going to do. By stopping doing bad things, she would become the main character. She'd seen it all while she was sick. The real Renee Blair was murdered in the banquet hall. Maybe it was because of the assignments. The girl screamed that it was impossible. Her brother inquired what was the matter. The girl noted that it was surprising. The boy had the same hair and eye color as Renee. Lady Blair tried to pronounce her brother's name Leiden, but immediately wondered if perhaps she had mispronounced his name. The girl called out to her brother. The latter was shocked. The girl abruptly started apologizing that she was wrong. Leiden was amazed by her apology. Then it came to the girl, that's right. Renee never apologizes after all. Leiden noted that it seems that the sister was very sick since the first thing she said was apologizing. After which the guy added that if she apologized, let her apologize to Solon first. She reminded that she had hit her a week ago. The girl was angry, which meant he was more worried about Solene. Leiden Blair had lost his parents early. He inherited the title of Marquis at a young age, the genius of all geniuses. Lady Blair's heart can't take it, and then there's his assistant, Anastasia. Her brother couldn't help but fall in love with their Anastasia because she is so dazzling, smart, sweet, and to top it all off, she has magic. But why is her name Solon? I wish everyone would call her by her first name instead of using a nickname. The brother came closer and clarified if she wanted to apologize. The girl replied that of course she was thinking of apologizing. As he left, Leiden added that his sister should take care of her health, for she was not yet fully recovered. Renee jumped out of bed and wondered if her family should be there for her when she was sick. She hoped they were. A notice appeared that today's mission was to slap the maid serving her, along with options to accept or decline. Renee accepted this time, mentally adding to leave the maids alone already. Renee turned to the maid brushing her hair. She inquired as to her name. The maid burst into tears that mistress was curious about her name. Renee wondered if she should hit this maid. Wiping away her tears, the maid replied that her name was Grendel. Renee thanked the maid Gerndl. The girl sincerely did not understand how she could hit someone for no reason. She was so nice after all, and how could she hit her? Then, Renee got the idea to hit herself and she slapped herself. An error popped up. You have to hit the maid. The maid was shocked, screaming about mistress's cheek. The maid offered to call a healer, though no, she decided to go and call mistress. That's when Renee got the idea that, well, all she had to do was become a maid. She abruptly declared that she wanted to be a maid from now on. The maid was shocked. She no longer wished to be sick again, but in the end, that option was a losing proposition as well. The girl shouted her name, Renee Blair, and declared that she was appointing herself maid. An error popped up that the girl was not a maid. Renee didn't understand why. She had assigned herself as a maid. The error about the maid was still there. Since Leiden is the head of the family, he is also responsible for the staff. The girl wondered if she should ask him to assign Renee as a maid. It would look very strange, though. The maid yelled that if Renee was angry, she should just hit her. Renee wondered why she should hit the maid. Of course, that was Renee Blair's way of hitting everyone. Renee tore out of the room, yelling to Grendel that she would be back soon. The girl knocked on the room, wondering if her brother was inside. Leiden appeared out of the blue and asked the girl what she was doing here. Renee was frightened and slapped him and yelled at him to leave. Leiden fell down. The girl caught herself and apologized, adding that she was frightened. Leiden stood up and remarked that she looked more like a ghost in here. Renee told him to go with her. Walking into his office, Renee wondered why the place where her brother worked was so huge. The girl immediately noticed the pile of paperwork, but he didn't care. Renee stated to Leiden that she had something to say. The guy replied that he was busy and they would talk later. The girl stated that it was very important. He needed to give her permission to go into personnel management. Leiden was dumbfounded and asked why she would do that. The girl confidently replied that she wanted to take care of it from now on. Leiden recalled that he asked why. Renee stated that she just had to, he just had to let her. Her brother clarified that she didn't want to do something like that, right? And it's a big responsibility. She concluded that means she didn't want to do it. The girl mentally turned to old Renee Blair, saying that she had left everything to Leiden and lived at her pleasure. She had no conscience at all. Here she decided that it was a good thing if Renee Blair hadn't done it originally. Renee said it was her job too, so she would take over. Leiden didn't understand what that number was. The girl confidently stated that it was nothing like that. Of course, to Leiden it might be suspicious. She asked her brother if he didn't believe her. If he didn't believe it, he could put a condition on it. The girl mentally stated that fine, and she would definitely deal with it. Leiden replied that he wouldn't do it. Suddenly, he decided to ask his sister about her face. Had someone hit her? The girl made a cute face and asked if he was afraid of his little sister being beaten up by someone. Leiden clarified about the fear and noted that it was something like that. Renee then asked her brother again if he would give her the job or not. The question came up as to what the terms would be. Renee stated that she could do anything. Leiden replied that if she could, she should not let her sister abuse her power. Renee wondered if he meant for her not to fire anyone. The girl stated to her brother that she understood. Leiden added that she should not cut anyone's salary without a reason. If she broke those rules, he would chase his sister away. Renee was dumbfounded that it was so immediate. However, it didn't matter to her now and she agreed. The girl answered her brother that it was fine. Leiden froze. The girl did not understand why he froze. The guys clasped their little fingers together to seal the agreement. Renee thought her brother was good after all. Leiden noted that her sister had gotten weird. Suddenly the girl laughed, calling her brother a fool and saying that it wasn't that she had gotten weird, it was just that everything was back to normal. A butler came into Renee's room with a stack of papers. She asked the lady if she needed anything else. Renee stated that no, that was enough. There were so many resignations in the stack. It had to be because of Renee. Butler reported that she went then. Renee thanked her. The girl herself commented that it was her job nonetheless, and she would have to sweat. She saw Susan Bellamy's application and wondered if this was the new maid. However, the girl has never seen her for some reason. The resume was neatly written. Renee wondered if Grendel was doing all the work now. She would have to ask about that later. Here, Renee came across something odd, information about some Hugo Knights. He discovered a dragon sleeping in the eastern mountains and defeated the dragon. The corpse was disposed of except for the bones and heart, which was sold to the Magic Tower. At the bottom is Leiden's signature. Did he come to Renee by mistake? Renee hesitated for a moment. Suddenly, the butler returned, saying that there were extra in the papers she had given her. Renee immediately stretched out that it seemed to be them. Perhaps she shouldn't have read it. She wasn't feeling well now. Renee remembered that Leiden said it's the hiring period. She remembered about the date of birth. She only knows Anastasia's, but she doesn't know how old Renee Blair is, and it's such a nightmare. Anyway, she wrote down everything she could. Now she's a maid. She can't look at it anymore, tries to gently kick herself. Again, the error popped up that she wasn't a maid. Another failure. Suddenly, she slapped herself again, but harder. And a notification popped up that the task had passed. Renee shouted to the entire office that she had succeeded and that the nasty window was getting it. The maid was dumbfounded, standing in front of the door. Leiden handed the maid a box, telling her to apply this to Renee's face. And she, needless to say, Leiden ordered it. The maid was a little scared. She remembered Renee wondering why she would hit the maid. Perhaps she was back again. Mrs. Blair had changed a lot, though. Renee abruptly opened the door of her own room and asked Handel what was wrong. Handel showed the medicine, saying that this should be applied to her cheeks. Renee was dumbfounded if it was true that Handel wanted to apply the medicine to her. Handel was sure that Renee had actually changed. It was true, and she was so glad it wasn't a dream. It's been a week, and there are a few things Renee has learned. 1, if she refuses 3 assignments, she will get a penalty. 2, there is no need to do all 3 tasks. The only assignment is punch the maid in the face, and then there is no penalty. Last third, and most importantly, if she is successful in the task, she is rewarded with money. Even though she didn't do anything, she got a lot of money. Still, money from terrible deeds is a bit much. Renee forgot about the 4th. At 9 o'clock in the morning, she hears the alarm clock and the mission window appears. Today's mission is to go to Leiden Blair's office and mess up the papers he's been working on all night. Renee concluded that this was a bad idea from the start and clicked reject. Someone knocked. Renee assumed it was Grendel and invited her in, but it turned out to be Leiden, wearing a strange outfit. He asked his sister if she wasn't prepared. Renee didn't understand him. Leiden shared that he had thought the girl would not let him into the room and let her only freak out. The girl wondered what he meant. The second assignment of the day is today's banquet to celebrate the safe return of Hugo Knights. Even though she wasn't invited, she would go. Renee asked her brother if he was talking about the banquet in honor of Knight Hugo. Leiden noted that meant her sister was aware of it. The king had his sights set on the Hugo Knights conquering dragons. He decided to throw a grand banquet to reward them. Renee didn't understand how she could have forgotten about it. Renee Blair was just about to die at this banquet. She wondered if the banquet was tonight, and this is the last assignment and she has no choice. The girl realizes that she will have to refuse and tells her brother not to worry because she will not go there. Leiden motioned for her not to cause trouble. Renee indignantly inquired if she had been causing her brother any trouble lately. Her brother asked her sister not to torture herself. She reminded him that she had hurt her head after all. Renee indignantly replied that there was nothing wrong with her head. Leiden replied that he thought it was, and added that he'd be back. Renee wondered if her brother was really laughing. That's when she remembered about the mission window and that she should hit reject, but it was suddenly gone. She realized that when she was waving her arms around, she had accidentally pressed a button. A window popped up that the task was in progress. Renee thought she was going to freak out, but she had changed and become kind. It's for a reason after all. She'll hide, and then she won't die. She doesn't want to suffer from this fever again. She's going to the Imperial Palace. The butler alerted Mrs. Blair that if the head of the family finds out, he won't keep quiet so easily. Renee stated that everything was fine and she would walk herself. She then asked if she looked normal and asks her to tell her. Voretskaya replied that yes, but Renee has an unhealthy complexion. She stated at home that she needed to do her makeup right away. She had covered the bruises and now they shouldn't be visible. Renee's eyes noticed something. She saw that there were soldiers standing there. As she approached the entrance, she saw Anastasia. Renee immediately remembered that she hadn't even apologized to the girl. Renee wanted to address Anastasia, but the guards sharply blocked the passage and ordered her to show them her invitation. Renee didn't understand what the invitation was or how she had gotten it. Renee asked if her brother Leiden had shown it to them. The girl noted that Leiden had taken her invitation by mistake. Renee sat down to help Anastasia, but she asked her to wait. Anastasia thanked the girl and looked like an angel at that moment. As it turns out, Mr. Ledeen didn't say anything and he doesn't have an invitation. Perhaps there was some mistake. Renee mentally replied that it was because she had lied, but she immediately replied that she seemed to have lost her invitation and asked her to call Leiden, please. Knights stated that they can't leave this place. Renee stated that she would just see him. The Knights replied that if she didn't have an invitation, then please let her go back to her place. She only needs to go in. Renee then asked Anastasia to call Leiden to her. Suddenly, someone asked what was going on. The Knights immediately greeted the person who spoke. The man put his hand on Renee's shoulder and told her to explain what was going on here. Renee didn't realize who it was, but he looked so familiar for some reason. The Knights replied that this lady didn't have an invitation. Renee told him to take his hands off her, and the guy said the girl's name. She asked if he knew her. The boy replied that there was no one in this country who did not know her. The girl was indignant as to why he was speaking informally. The guy asked in response why she didn't address him formally either, after which he added, "Why would they do that? Don't they get along as it is?" Suddenly, the guy said that then she would become his partner. Renee didn't understand what kind of partner and what it all meant. The butler told her in her ear that the guy was Hugo Knights. She could be his partner in entry. The girl didn't believe it, but Hugo added that it was true. He clarified, didn't the girl want to go to the banquet? If she became his partner, she could go inside. But in return, she must be by his side throughout the banquet. She wondered if, even if it turned out that way, she would pass the assignment. Hugo had already started to say that if she didn't want to, that was fine. However, the girl asked him to stand and pulled him to her. Hugo noted that this is the girl really that strong. Renee stated that yes, she would be his partner and tells them to go, get inside. The guy remarked that good and he was very happy about that. Suddenly, Anastasia called out the sir's name. Divin Fergus. Renee froze. He'd said then that he hadn't liked her from the start. Her memories became clearer. She knows this man. Divin Fergus is the man who killed Renee Blair. Anastasia grabbed Renee's hand and pulled her to her. She added that she had made a mistake and should not have left. Anastasia then pulled Renee into her arms and stated that Renee would accompany her. In Anastasia's arms, Renee savored how good she smelled. Divin remarked that, well, since that was the case, it was too bad it didn't work out. Renee didn't see where he was going. He was acting overconfident too. Renee brightly asked Anastasia if it was true that she would accompany her, go with her. Anastasia replied that it was part of her job. Renee wondered if that was the reason she had helped her. Anastasia suggested that Renee go. Renee was amazed. This was not how she had envisioned the banquet. A notification popped up that she had failed a task, and there was a penalty for that. The penalty? High fever, time, noon, 11 hours and 59 minutes. Renee didn't realize if she hadn't come to the banquet. It couldn't be. Could it be because she had come of her own accord? Some man had told the Marquis of Blair that they would see each other tomorrow. Leiden noticed the man's staff. The girl who had noticed Renee and Anastasia at the banquet and that Renee looked strange came up to him and asked if the girl was sick. Leiden remembered that Renee had told him she wasn't coming and she ended up being here. The girl asked Leiden if he was worried. Leiden confidently replied that no, nothing like that. He was rather worried about Celine. Renee sincerely didn't understand after all. She hadn't given up 3 assignments yet. So why was she being penalized and why did things suddenly change drastically? Compared to last time, it was still bearable. Renee turned to Anastasia and asked if she could go there. Renee settled into a chair on the balcony. Anastasia pulled back the curtains. Renee shared that she thought it would get easier now. Anastasia wondered if that meant that the girl was still recovering from the last time. Renee replied that no, she has recovered since last time. Just now, she was fine. It would take half a day, and everything would be back to normal. Anastasia didn't understand what half a day had to do with it, what it meant. Renee has a fever, and there's nothing Anastasia can do. She needs to call a healer. Renee says no. She says she's fine. Anastasia doesn't think so, however, and she decides to call a healer right away. Renee turns to Anastasia and states that she doesn't understand her. She is so kind. Renee knows she is a very nice person, but she doesn't understand. How can Anastasia care so much about Renee Blair, a man who has done a lot of unpleasant things? Isn't Anastasia tired? How many times has she wanted to give up? Renee asked her why she continued, why she didn't give up. Anastasia told Renee that she was wrong. If she was really good, she wouldn't have stolen Renee's invitation. Renee was shocked by her words. Anastasia had originally gotten her invitation, and she hoped the girl would not come to the banquet. Anastasia turned to Renee and sat on her knees in front of her, apologizing for deceiving her. Renee didn't understand what Anastasia was doing. Renee asked indignantly if the girl really wanted to be hit. Renee asked her to calm down because she had told Leiden herself that she wasn't coming to the banquet. Renee had always made a fuss at the banquet, and she hoped that wouldn't happen this time. Renee stated that she understood why Anastasia had covered it up. It's okay. It's her punishment. A window appeared with the last task of the day. There were a lot of people gathered at the banquet. She needed to ruin everyone's evening and start a verbal altercation with the man she was about to meet. Renee was pissed off about the damn assignment. Why won't it calm down? Extremely difficult choice. She'd been sick for a week or slapped someone. She didn't know what to choose. Renee wondered if this could be the reason Renee Blair had been murdered. To slap the Divin she'd met then. Renee didn't realize what she should do. Someone came in, and that person turned out to be Aiden, who asked Anastasia what she was doing here. Anastasia noted that Renee had a sudden fever, and there was no way she could talk her into calling a doctor. Aiden asked the girl why she was doing it. Renee replied that she was just asking for help. It's not like anybody hurt anybody. Someone announced that the Knights of Hugo Knights were coming in. Aiden suggested that they should go inside already, since His Highness would be here soon. Anastasia noted that she thought Renee would be better off resting here. Renee replied that yes, okay. Anastasia used magic to create ice that doesn't melt and asked to use it. Renee thanked Anastasia. Lastly, she added that she would be back after meeting with His Highness, so she asked her to wait for Renee here. Renee decided to accept the assignment because it was the last one of the day. Suddenly, Leiden came to her. He asked if his sister had said she wasn't going to come and why her face was all red. He also asked if the girl had apologized to Solon. The number 1 appeared above Leiden. She assumed it was the beginning of the assignment. What should she do now? She realized that she had to think about it. The girl jumped up from her seat and moved into the hall. Leiden asked her to wait, for she had a fever. Renee apologized to Leiden. Numbers appeared above all the people. 67th person, 94th person, no, 95th. Renee noticed Anastasia, and the latter noticed her in return. Anastasia asked Renee why she went out. Hadn't she told her to stay on the balcony? How was she feeling? Renee replied that she was fine and asked Anastasia if she had a mirror. The 100th person she sees in the reflection of the mirror who punches her in the face, at that moment, the task will be done. It's better than ruining everyone's holiday. Anastasia happened to have a small mirror. Renee snatched it up and thanked Anastasia. She ran on, running past 97, 98, and 99. She has to close her eyes to see nothing. All she has to do is slap herself. Suddenly, she crashed into someone and fell, breaking Anastasia's mirror. The girl was lying on the floor, saying that they would give her a fine for not completing the task. Someone asked the girl if she was okay. The guy held out his hand to her and apologized. He didn't see the girl. The number 100 appeared above his head. Renee called him a damn bastard and that it was all because of him. A notification popped up that she had met the 100th person and got angry. The mission was successful. She realized that all she had to do was get angry with him. The girl apologized. The guy gushed that it was his fault. He held out his hand to her and wondered if she had hurt herself. Renee was saddened by the mirror situation. Fortunately, it was a different person. Renee mused aloud that the mirror was broken. The guy added that he was sorry and would buy him a new one. He asked her to try not to touch his face because there might be splinters. Renee held out her hand to him and apologized. The guy pointed out that he didn't mean to get sloppy like that. The girl stood up and stated that it wouldn't work now. It annoyed her so much, since it wasn't his fault in any way. Renee didn't understand why she was like this. Why are assignments just to make her hurt others? She just wanted to live a normal life here. Tears were streaming down her face. The guy offered to hit her if it would make her feel better. He's ready to get hit by her lady. Renee was puzzled. The boy added again that she could hit him if it would make her feel better. Renee wondered if the man had completely lost his mind. The girl clarified if he was serious now. The guy replied that he was serious. The girl noted that if she hit him, he would kill her. The guy replied that he wouldn't. Although he is a strange man, she cannot miss this great opportunity. After all, then she will get a bigger fine, from which she can die. The girl clarified if it was true that he wouldn't kill her. The guy had a start that she kept asking that, but Renee charged at him with a slap. A notification appeared that the task had passed. The guy noted that it hurt. The girl seemed to be pretty pissed off. Renee started to fall and the guy caught her, noticing that she had a high fever. Suddenly, Divin appeared, noting that it felt like this road was constantly changing when he came to the banquet. Divin noticed that the white-haired guy had Renee Blair in his arms. Divin wondered if he didn't know if he was stupid. The guy replied that he shouldn't throw around such words. Divin noted that he should kill her. However, what should he do? Anastasia ran toward them, yelling for him to get away from Renee now and asking what he was doing. The blonde-haired boy replied that it was a misunderstanding. Anastasia asked them if they thought she would actually believe it. Davin stated that it wasn't fair. Couldn't the girl see that the guy had been hit? Anastasia pointed out that the reason Renee hit him. She assumed that Lord Divin had done it and decided to frame Renee. Divin didn't understand why it was always his fault. Divin asked the blonde boy if the woman was always so rude. He asked the blonde guy if he knew Anastasia Solon. The blonde guy decided to ask if Divin was going to kill him. A banquet where nothing strange should happen. Who's an enemy? Who's an ally? It's even hard to determine who's guilty of accidental murder here. The blonde clarified why Divin was hesitating. He answered that he didn't know. Usually looking at Renee, he was always very annoyed. But today it was like she was a different person. Divin decided he wouldn't hurt her. But he thought he'd regret not finishing her off today. The blonde asked if that meant he'd turn down his assignment today. Divin replied that apparently so. His today's assignment was to kill Renee Blair at the banquet honoring the return of the Hugo Knights. Divin pressed reject. It had been so long since he'd last gotten a ticket. People in the crowd wondered what Lady Blair was doing here. They're sure she's up to something again. A window has appeared that the assignment is on. At the welcome banquet, which will last a whole week, she needs to embarrass a nobleman by throwing a cake at him. Tonight's assignment was not only to slap the 100th person, but why wasn't the second assignment to set fire to Leedon's room? Renee announced that she was not going to the banquet anymore. Leedon lifted Renee up. The girl in turn declared that everything was really all right. He tried to find out from his sister who was the man who had taken Celine to the carriage yesterday. Renee replied confidently that she knew nothing. Leedon noted that if his sister was sick, she'd better stay home. If she were fine, it was unlikely she would have hit Divin Fergus. Renee tried to remember whose cheek she had hit then. A man with a cane appeared. He remarked that it was nice to see Leedon and Renee together. The man also noted that Miss Blair seemed to have changed a lot lately. The girl wondered if that was sarcasm, but she was an adult and could ignore such things. Leedon asked the man why he cared. The man replied that it was just a pleasure to look at such a thing. For only a month before, Renee had looked like a wild stallion. Looking at her healthy expression, he asked if she had recovered. He also clarified, didn't Miss Blair have many advantages beyond personal property? Renee was shocked. Leedon fenced her in and declared that enough was enough. He asked the man to please leave because he was talking too much. The man clarified, wondering if he had said something wrong. He's just worried about Miss Blair. Leedon wondered if he was a fool. 3 years ago, this man proposed to Renee. The man had asked her to wait. Leedon clarified that if she rejected him, she would change her mind again. Renee hesitated. But then it came to her that 3 years ago, Renee Blair had been a minor. The man shouted that that was a thing of the past. Leedon remarked that the man was such a vulgar and nasty old man. Did he really think that Leedon didn't know anything? The man became angry and swung his cane, shouting to put him in such an embarrassing position once more. The Count was asked to come to his senses. Someone suggested calling the guards. The Count shouted for them to be quiet. He moved toward the boys, shouting that he wouldn't just let it go. He took a swing. Renee was terrified. If Leedon was right, there was nothing she could do. However, Renee caught his cane. The man was telling her to let her go. The girl replied that it was dangerous, so let him let go first. Leedon told his sister to just let go. Renee thought she had to protect herself somehow, didn't she? A new window appeared saying that the last task of the day had been completed. Her reward, 100 gold coins. People were paying attention to Earl Sirius. He's still the same, how uncultured. The Earl noted that the girl was acting the same way she did 3 years ago. He had wanted to make that little shit Renee kneel then. Renee then playfully clarified if the Count really wanted to marry her. Could it be that he was laughing at her? The Count didn't understand why he had embarrassed himself like this again. After all, he had done what he was supposed to do. Ignoring those stares and whispers was impossible. He had been told to just do what the cane told him to do. However, what should he do now? Cane ordered him to kill Renee now. Leedon told his sister to give him a hand, since she shouldn't have interfered. The girl clarified if her brother was worried about her. Cane told the man not to ignore them, and crush it now. Renee said it didn't hurt at all. Renee stared at the cane and realized she couldn't keep her eyes off it. Unexpectedly, they were blocked by Divin Fergus. Renee didn't understand why the man was here. Davin asked His Highness if this banquet was not created for their knights. Davin snatched up the cane and noted that it was created from dragon bones. Renee remembered the knight's report. Davin called out to the soldier and ordered him to retrieve the cane. The Earl wanted to snatch it back, but Davin slapped his hand and remarked that it was funny. Dragon scales, claws, teeth, you name it, they give everything they get from a dragon's tupa. The only thing is, the bones are never processed. Because they hold the purest form of dragon magic, and if it falls into human hands, it can be a big problem. Davin clarified with the Count where he got it from, whether it was from the magic tower or if they had defeated the dragon themselves. The Count was indignant, asking what it meant. How dared Davin doubt him? The Count was ordered to calm down. Divin noted that he was only asking him, and suggested that he not spoil the mood around him. Renee was amazed that it was Divin Fergus who ended up taking all the blame. Renee ran up to him and wondered if he was all right, why he had decided to take the hit in the first place. Why didn't he just leave the blow? He's a knight. He also calls himself a dragon slayer. Davin shared that he just wasn't feeling well. He checked with Renee to see if the girl was starting to worry about anyone but herself. Leedon turned to Davin. He replied to Marquis Blair that it had been a long time and that he had met the girl in person yesterday. They couldn't talk because Miss Renee had lost the creature. Renee noted that her brother also hated Davin. Leiden noted that Davin and Renee seemed to have grown very close. Renee was dumbfounded and stated that they weren't. He calls her by her first name. The girl mentioned that they had talked a little yesterday. Leiden clarified that they were not close, but that they had started to communicate off the record since yesterday. Divin clarified how he could not call the lady by her name. Leiden remarked that there was an infirmary at the end of the corridor. Why wouldn't Divin go there? The boy replied that he thought there was no point in going if the Marquis could heal him. Leiden apologized and stated that he couldn't use magic so carelessly. Divin noted that it was impressive. Leiden asked Sir Fergus why the dragon bones were in Earl Sirius's possession. Divin offered to talk about it when they were alone. Renee clarified if she was interfering with their conversation. The diver noted that the girl had looked beautiful yesterday. Sion's cheek had swollen badly. Had the girl been faking it all this time? He by no means claimed, but he was grateful to her. Renee clarified about Sion if Diver saw who the girl hit. Divin doesn't like Zion, so he's grateful to the girl. He never thought the day would come when he would be grateful to a girl. The eyes full of disgust seemed to speak for themselves. She's just lucky because you don't always get that opportunity. They will kill her, Renee Blair, at any moment. Leiden told Divin to stop, and he told the Marquis that they would see each other later. He added that he hoped the girl wouldn't resort to such tricks again. Divin stated that he wasn't trying to trick them or anything like that. Renee thought about Sion. If he hadn't been the 100th person yesterday, the one she would have had to face would have been Davin. She doesn't know if she can call it luck because of her interference in the original story. But she knows one thing. She knows that the ending in which Divin Fergus kills her. The fact of her existence hasn't changed yet. She should go back to the mansion and think it over. Suddenly, she felt a sickening sensation. Someone was screaming for help. It was Catherine who was in the carriage. The carriage suddenly broke down. Renee saw people, among whom was the wounded Catherine. The girl assumed that she was dead. Then she saw a creature and realized from the clothes that it was Earl Sirius. But it could not be. She realized that those clothes had really hurt Count Sirius, and she had to get out of there. She decided to take off her shoes so they wouldn't get in the way. But then someone shouted at her to stand. The Count shouted that the wretch had insulted him in front of everyone. He should kill that little shit now. Renee noted if he was talking to himself, but she noted that it was different, as if there were two entities in one person's body. The creature asked Renee if this guy wanted her dead. He told her not to worry because he wouldn't kill her. She must be in so much pain that she would want to die. If they find out she's not at the banquet, the Knights of Hugo Knights would help her, but there were innocent citizens left behind. Renee didn't know what to do. She forced herself to think. Just think. A new window popped up with surprise assignment. She met a strange creature. Since he wasn't dead, she needs to go back to the banquet hall and kill other people. Renee was shocked and wondered if this was some kind of joke. There are tasks that can still be ignored. But this is out of bounds. This assignment, is she really being asked to commit murder right now? Renee didn't understand why she was. She started screaming, why is he doing this to her, to Renee Blair? What the hell had she done wrong? She slammed her fist down on the notification. The screen popped up that it was a surprise mission. Was she sure she wanted to decline? Perhaps this is Anastasia's role, not Renee Blair's. It's not like she can't use magic or fencing. Should she then refuse the assignment and be fined? It's no different than attempting suicide. So it seems like endless bullying that is destroying her as a character. No matter how much she struggles, there's no way for her to survive here. The Count inquired if she had finished her musings. The girl inquired as to what he was. The Count asked in response why she decided to ask now. Why waste her time? The mission time had expired and she was being assigned this mission. Renee pointed out that they do whatever they want. However, it didn't matter now. She did not know for how long the mission and how she would fight the Count now. She threw one punch at the girl, but suddenly recoiled herself. At that, it asked itself what it was doing. Why didn't it just kill the girl? The creature replied. The man inside stammered. The Count asked what would happen if the Hugo Knights came here. He tried to get the creature to just hurry up and kill the thing before they got here. The creature noted how noisy it was. Suddenly, It cut off its own arm. The Count began to scream exhaustedly. The creature clarified if it was true that these Hugo Knights were really coming here. The Count did not answer. The creature concluded that there was nothing to be done and said that he would have to decide for himself. Renee saw that it had regenerated its arm. It was regeneration. The creature was heading for the banquet hall, and Renee realized she couldn't let it in there. The creature called the girl a hellcat. Renee mentally stated that she didn't want to die. She remembered asking Anastasia if that was how she was doing magic today, too. She wanted to be a master genius magician. She remembered how she had called her stupid and was indignant for who else was stupid. The girl's family was on friendly terms with Renee's father, and for some reason she thought her father didn't have any friends. She asked Aiden if he wanted to play with her. He'd give her money, and she'd play with him in that case. Funny, one thing became clear to the girl, that this was Renee Blair's life, not hers. It was as if the story had a predetermined ending. She wondered if Renee Blair was destined to die like this. Suddenly, someone whipped the cane at the creature and asked why it smelled like a lizard. It was Daiwen and Zion. Zion turned to Daiwen and asked why he should not rest. After all, he had just traveled from a fever. Daven told Zion to shut up, for he could kill that lizard even with his eyes closed. Renee realized that the blonde-haired guy was that Sion. She decided to apologize to him for hitting him yesterday, mentally noting that she needed to apologize first. Ott noted that there were so many unnecessary things that got in the way in this small country. He thought that he should have killed that girl first, then nothing would have happened again. He said that one could go crazy and kill that woman who was laughing at him. Destroy everyone but the one standing in front of him. He has something to take from her, so let her be. Sion was dumbfounded by Renee's apology and asked her not to apologize, because wasn't it his fault? Daven pointed out to Renee that it's dangerous here, so the girl should go to the banquet hall. If anyone tries to come out, she needs to stop them. Renee wondered if she should just run away. A window appeared with the very same surprise mission. Here, she wondered what if Divin and Sion lost to the Count and he came after her. Then there would be a massacre. Sion told Lady Renee that it was dangerous here, so she needed to find a safe place immediately. Someone announced that they had finally met again. The Count started screaming, "How dare he kill him, the lowly human?" Renee didn't know what he was talking about. Maybe he was now a possessed ghost or something? The voice stated that she would get revenge on all of them. Renee didn't understand what the man was talking about and asked Sion who had killed who. Sion replied that he was no longer human now, a monster. Daven asked if she remembered the dragon bone he mentioned earlier. It contains the spirit of the dragon. It is spoken of as something magical. When a dragon dies, its spirit remains in its bones. Ordinary people can't cope with such power. They lose their humanity and control over themselves. Doesn't the girl see its appearance? If so, it is magically a stone. Yes, dragons turned into such stones. So there's a good chance it's dragon bone. Divin rushed into the fray, asking if that was the case. Divin is great at analyzing things. This is their chance. Renee came to the decision that they needed to evacuate Catherine and everyone else. Behind her, she dragged Sion. Sion noted that you a lot of blood, but it wasn't fatal, and he thinks he just hit them and didn't pass out. Renee exhaled a sigh of relief. She clarified how to stop the bleeding and if it could be stopped at all. Sion replied that as long as it was too early to be above heart level, they would be fine. The girl wondered how to help them then. Sion pointed out that he didn't even have a cloth yet, something to press against the faucet. Renee began to tear the dress and asked about any fabric would do. Sion shared that the first thing to do was to tie a bandage over the wound to stop the bleeding. He also remembered that the lady's was early as well and rewound it for her. The girl thanked him. Sion told her to go to the castle to get first aid there first. Renee blurted out that she didn't want to come. She clarified that isn't the Count targeting her, because if she flees the castle, he will follow her, and then everyone will die because of her, won't they? So it's better for her to die than to let innocent people die. Sion replied that he didn't understand why she was so worried about it. Yesterday's event is over after all, which means she'll die at it, so she should hurry up and hide. There's a voice saying that it's the girl who wants to run away. Suddenly, a wall formed around Sion and Renee. They didn't understand where it came from. Renee began to apologize to Sion. She would try to find a way out. The creature laughed and said that no, he would kill the knight and take the girl with him. Daiwen turned to the lizard and clarified, Hadn't he been warned earlier? There were a lot of people there after all. That's why he didn't do anything, however. Of these dragons that Davin had killed, he was the nastiest. The creature shouted for Daiwin to shut his mouth. Davin winded that it couldn't help it. It liked to tease him, but it would definitely kill him this time. Suddenly, while Davin was attacking, his sword broke. The creature laughed and said that she thought someone deserved to die the death of death. It was Davin. Meanwhile, Liden came outside and saw the dome. Using magic, he blocked the dragon with a magical barrier and ordered to not let the citizens leave the banquet hall. People ran up to him and told him they were in big trouble. Count Sirius has become half-dragon, and the dome is called Half-Dragon Space. Liden replied that he knows and that they need to hold him while he is there. Staj began to say that if the Marquis uses inhabiting magic, then they will neglect him. Liden pointed out that if the guy continued to keep his hand raised, then, one way or another, the Count would turn into a half-dragon attacking them. When a dragon dies, its spirit remains in its bones. Liden clarified if he looks like a fool, this has all been known for a long time. He clarified about Lord Fergus and Lord Glass. The guard could say nothing. Lead told the guard to better go and gather the Hugo Knights. He further clarified what he was to do. Liden replied for him to keep his hands up and march. First of all, Liden needs to find out the number of people who were caught by the tracking spell. The isoforms of life, he could detect them. Liden noted that the dome was a space. There were 3 people outside, and there were also 3 people in the space, not counting the half-dragon. 2 of them were Sir Fergus and Lord Glass. There was 1 man left, and Liden realized it was Renee. Liden asked how long it would take to suppress the half-dragon's power. The guard replied that even if he succeeded, it would take half a day. The guard decided to check with the captain and brought a decorative sword. It's not the kind of sword you use for fighting. Liden ordered him to tell him where the real balls were, and if he didn't know, to find them and bring them to him. Divin looked at his broken sword, noting that whatever it was, what was it even? Zion dragged him by the hair. He was outraged and asked what he was doing, if he was a carrot to be pulled by his hair like that. Sion remarked that he thought Divin would want to run away, but he didn't think he was going to die. Divin replied that even so, he was not happy about not being able to use the ball, and that he was fine with that. Divin stated that even without the ball, he can't lose to him. Sion noted that so many excuses. Renee asked them indignantly, wondering if the 2 of them had really decided to fight together. The girl was puzzled, if they were really Hugo Knights. They are so unreliable, one must look for a way out, Renee began to think. She noted that the floor here was very hard, and digging would not work. The most effective solution would be to break down the wall, but she didn't know what to use, and then she saw the shards that had fallen out when the carriage had broken down. With that, she found the weapon, but began to wonder if she would make it and why the carriage had broken so quickly. The girl hit the wall with all her might, but it didn't help. She heard her brother's voice yelling to stop stopping already. She realized that it was right in front of her, very close. However, the girl was wondering why he was here, and what if someone was imitating his voice. The voice answered that it was him, Liden, and asked her sister not to hesitate and to approach him. The girl asked how she could believe that, because maybe he's a dragon's mate or maybe a second dragon. Liden replied, "What a silly thing to say." Suddenly shouted that it was true. Leden only cares about putting her joints in order, and he has no interest in her at all. The half-dragon created this wall so he can mimic her brother's voice. Plus, the real Leden hates her, so the voice that's supposedly trying to save her doesn't belong to Leden. Leden on the other side of the dome told his sister to listen carefully. He offered to think that he actually cared for her like a brother, and if he really hated her, would he have come here then? Well, he also asked her to stop acting like a fool and go to the wall before it was completely covered in darkness. Renee asked again if it was true that it was her brother Leden. The boy answered that it was, and specified how many times he had to repeat it, and then he called himself a fool. He swept up and found her. He thanked her for trusting him. He told her listen carefully, they are now trapped by a half-dragon while they are inside and need to try to protect themselves. Each dragon has a different spell, so it will take time to decipher it. However, he didn't realize what was happening. The magic on the area his sister hit had weakened a lot, so if he tried it, he thought he could create a small gap. Renee clarified what to do, whether to try again. Then she remembered she had to find Divin and Sion. Leden asked her if she was friends with them. The girl didn't see how it mattered right now. Leiden noted that if she created a breach, it would be very small and would be repaired in a matter of seconds. Renee clarified what the reason for this breakup is then. Leiden suggests that the knights probably have decorative balls now. He hands her a real sword through the gap to be given to the knights. Renee clarifies about Davin and Zion. The girl announced to her brother that it was a great idea. Leiden clarified what she meant, though she needed to focus anyway. She only had one chance. She started to notice that the wall was crumbling, the spell canceling. Renee noted that the light was so warm. The brother asked his sister if she was Ronin. The girl stated that she had hurt her arm a little, but it was okay. Sion had helped her. Leiden handed the swords through the gap and asked her sister to be careful. If she was in pain, she would have to be patient for a while. Renee told her brother not to worry. She would be back safe and sound. Leiden grinned and replied that fine, he would be waiting. It was the first time the girl had seen her brother smile. Grabbing her swords, she realized she needed to take them to the knights. The girl called out to Sion and Davin, saying she had brought a sword, but the knights continued to fight amongst themselves. The boys shouted during the fight that the half-dragon was attacking people. Meanwhile, the half-dragon himself remarked that he wasn't doing anything. Abruptly, Renee shouted that they were trying so hard that she had brought them the sword and indignantly asked the guys what they were doing. The guys stopped fighting and turned their attention to the girl and asked where she got the sword from. The girl clarified if it mattered now the sight of the Count now walking towards them. Sion shouted to Lady Renee to step back. Renee thought she couldn't drop her sword chewing. The Count called her a foolish woman. The girl realized that she should drop the sword and run, but suddenly, a voice said, "Okay," the steel one would be taken care of. Renee assumed that he was now Sion's sword. Renee suddenly grabbed the sword and engaged the Count. The sword itself moved in her hands. Davin kicked the Count's foot, pushed the girl, then called her by name. Renee apologized to Sion. She was in a hurry, so she had to use his sword. Locking their hands on the sword, Sion and Renee smashed the dragon bone stone. There was a screaming sound. It was gone. Rena realized that it was under her feet, for if Sion hadn't caught her, the sword would have been absorbed by the dragon's power. The wall began to disappear, and the girl was glad to be free at last. Sion pointed out that he was very embarrassed. The girl had tackled a half-dragon all by herself. But the girl stated that no, they just had decorative balls, and Davin was already ready to fight without one, after all. The girl shared that the sword was brought by Leiden. Then Renee noticed that there were so many people here. Anastasia was running towards them. She hugged her and apologized, which made her worry. Anastasia asked if the girl was hurt, and she said she was fine. Sion walked up to Leiden and greeted him. Marquis then stated that the half-dragon was defeated. Leiden greeted him back and noted what he could see. His Majesty will send them a letter soon. Leiden has some explaining to do. He asked Sion a serious question about how many dragon bones had been stolen. He added that they were very clever since they managed to hide it from the royal family. But he was interested in the answer. He asked when and how many bones were stolen. Sion began to tell that right after defeating the dragon, the 5 bones were already missing and the disappearance didn't occur naturally. The cut was unbroken, as if someone had torn it to pieces and taken the bones. Leiden was horrified that after discussion they hadn't come to a decision to keep it a secret from everyone. Sion replied that they were not to disturb the royal family. However, once it became official, His Majesty would wish to return the order to the royal family. Sion added that after the knights divided into 2 teams, one was in charge of generation and the other was in charge of collection. The guy is willing to accept punishment for stealing the bones, but the knights who enslaved the dragon should not be punished. Leiden noted that the guy was really crazy. Since one bone had been destroyed, there were still a few left. Leiden wondered why Sion was so obsessed with destroying the dragon. If anything is more important right now, blacken the stolen bones, he should prepare a response that would satisfy His Majesty. Anastasia continued to apologize to Renee and asked if she had been scared. Renee, at this point, thought about what she should say to apologize for giving her a reason to worry about her. Renee was sorry for punching her in the face then, and she was grateful that Anastasia was there for her until the very end. Renee said the name of Anastasia. Well, then a new window appeared that the mission was failed because instead of killing others, the girl was killed by a strange creature. There is a penalty and punishment for him to fulfill the mission: fatal wounds in the stomach. The girl was horrified to see that it said mortal wound. That's when she noticed Cyan wondered what was wrong with his facial expression. It was strange, as if he could see her notification window. Then she felt pain. It felt like her stomach was being torn apart. She was in a lot of pain and started screaming. Leiden caught her as the girl was falling. She was in so much pain that she was having a hard time thinking, so bad. Looking at Leiden, she didn't realize what was wrong with his facial expression. All the girl could think about was the fact that she was in pain and begged to be killed sooner rather than later. Leiden was hugging his sister. Anastasia started to reach out her hand towards him, but pushed. The girl stated to the Lord that she would rather use healing magic. If they didn't help, Renee might die. Leiden noted that it wouldn't help either way. His magic, it doesn't work on her. It had been like this since childhood, the healing magic of divine power useless. Anastasia said that in that case, we should call a doctor. Daiwen appeared, what she had going on here. He came across the angry faces of Anastasia and Leiden. The guy doesn't understand why she's looking at him like that. Anastasia remembered about Aiden. His power should work for that reason too, but the girl immediately stopped and asked Leiden if he was listening to her. Suddenly, she slammed her fist into his face. Anastasia screamed at him to come to his senses because if Renee died, she would kill them all. Every single one of them out there. Renee thought about the fact that she had to breathe, take just one breath, for she was still alive. Leiden turned to Solon. He asked her to bring the king's physician and summon the Duke of Birdworth. Renee didn't realize where she was. There was such a beautiful moon, and then she realized she knew the place. It was a familiar landscape to her, such a peaceful night. She greeted the girl and asked, "Isn't it lovely here, and this is her favorite place?" She was thinking of showing it to her friends. She remembered that's how it was. She wanted to show this place to her friends. The girl told her that next time she would bring her friend here. Then she asked how old she was and what her name was. The girl couldn't remember her name or who she was. The girl clarified. Would she really look around her body every time someone asked her about her? After all, people don't do that when they are asked what their name is. The girl reflected on the fact that they don't usually look. The girl asked if she wasn't sure about something. What if it's not all what she thinks it is? The girl declared that she was her, so she needed to be sure of herself. Renee opened her eyes, lying in bed. She felt her body felt so heavy. Next to her was Aiden, who had picked up on the fact that the girl was awake. She abbreviated it to Ed. The guy interjected what she had just said and squeezed his hand. The girl said she called him Aiden. The guy replied that he thought he heard. The guy opened the curtains. Renee covered herself with a blanket against the light. He checked with the girl to see if she remembered anything. Renee didn't understand what she should remember. Aiden told her that she had passed out. She remembered the window where it was written that she had failed a mission for which there was a penalty. The penalty was a mortal wound. Time unknown. Her head rattled. She remembered the wound in her stomach and wondered if she had survived. The girl asked Aiden where she was. The boy replied that it was the Royal Palace Infirmary. The girl replied that her whole body ached terribly. Aiden noted that it had been a whole month. The girl had been unconscious for a month. Renee grimaced and clarified that the colors had already passed and she'd really wanted to see it. Aiden indignantly clarified if it mattered. The girl said she was thirsty. The guy irritably replied that he would bring it right away. The girl remembered that she was big early on. Was it really possible for her to be bedded in just a month? The girl saw that the wound on her stomach was neatly tightened. Aiden noted that if it hadn't been for the power of someone, it would have been impossible to heal completely in that amount of time. The girl asked uncomprehendingly who had healed her. The boy asked her to please tell him what had happened at that moment. Renee imagined telling her that she was given a mission every 9 hours, and if she didn't complete it, she would get a fine. This time, there was a mortal wound for not completing the mission. She realized she couldn't say that. Aiden noted that she didn't seem like she would say anything. For her information, 2 knights had been reprimanded. Renee asked, wondering why. They are suspected of stealing the dragon bones, just like Marquis Blair said. Aiden asked the girl what this reaction was all about. Did she really have any other suspects? She realized she couldn't explain anything right now. Mentally, she stated that she would try to help Divin and Cyan. However, she didn't understand why Aiden was here. It was as if he was courting her. She turned her attention to the atmosphere. Could it be obsessive love? Renee called out to Aiden sharply, saying that she would tell him at once. She has no interest in him, after which she apologized. Aiden didn't understand what the hell that was about. Renee replied that it was okay then. Anastasia burst into the room, calling out to Renee. She asked the girl if she was okay, after which she hugged the girl. Anastasia added that Sir Divin Fergus had helped her survive. Anastasia and Aiden left. The girl's assignment today was to knock the maid down so that she would fall, and Renee completed it herself. Leiden appeared in the infirmary. The girl noted that he was right on time. Renee asked if she could go home now. Leiden replied that no, there was still a week left. The girl stated that she didn't like it here. Leiden replied that it was okay since she was under his supervision. Renee clarified that their home was worse than this place. She was really fine. Leiden noted that his sister didn't even ask how she was hurt, after which asked if she knew why she was hurt. Did the two of them? Renee asked her brother if he suspected them, if he'd decided to sue them. Leiden asked who else would have done it if it wasn't him. Renee stated that it was a false accusation. He didn't know anything. It wasn't the guy's fault. Leiden shouted that she hadn't asked who had done it, had she? Let her then tell him who hurt her. Renee asked her brother if he was angry. Leiden asked her brother if he was angry. The girl replied that she wasn't, but she was fine now. Renee sincerely did not understand why Leiden was angry. He noted that he must be having trouble grasping the whole situation right now because she had almost died. He saw that she had a huge wound. She could have died. Leiden asked his sister if she thought he didn't know what he was doing. Leiden added that the girl might be okay, but he himself was not okay. Had the girl decided to just turn a blind eye to what had happened? Leiden cried. He was definitely angry, as she lay weakened in his arms and there was nothing he could do. The girl recalled that in the novel he had not cried when Renee Blair died. Didn't he hate her? If she died, he would not shed a tear. After all, hadn't Renee Blair remained just as villainous? She didn't understand then why Leiden was crying now over his little sister who had ruined his whole life with her evil deeds. Or was it all because she was unconscious for a month? Leiden admitted that he was afraid she would die. After all, she is his family, his little sister. How can she be okay when he thinks about her death? Renee took his hand and said with tearful eyes that she was sorry. It was her fault. She asked him not to cry and apologized to him. Then, wiping her tears, she told Leiden again not to cry. She seriously asked him what she could do to calm her down. She hoped he wouldn't get even angrier. She suggested that he could write her a memorandum promising never to do something like this again. Leiden said that, then let her just do a favor for him. Renee said that she would certainly listen to him. He asked if that was true, to which Renee replied confidently that yes, it was true. Leiden laughed, then seriously asked his sister to tell him honestly what had affected her so much. Renee was puzzled by his question. Leiden swept up, not understanding why she was willing to listen to any of his requests.